going to talk about today. And I was like sitting on this idea. The more I thought about it, the more I didn't want to do it. So just in case you're wondering, this guy's always making videos and content. If I think about anything for too long, I can't do it. And so that's something I'll talk about in a second. So anyway, how are you? Leave me a comment, leave me a little question below if you've got anything for me. I want to talk to you. I've got a great parable for you. I've got a really awesome parable that's going to help you today. It's a great story. So I'll give it a little minute or two, but yeah, just in case you think I've got my shit dialed in, I do not. I make a lot of mistakes. I go unprepared for a lot of things, and then I hope it works. That's the beauty of life, right? You and I doing life together, not knowing if it's going to work. That's the fun. Am I right? You know, I have a lovely girl going over with me to LA next week to do Pro-Am. And one of the things that I've made abundantly clear to her is that you can prepare all you want. You can get all your routines dialed in. You can get everything together, your dress, your hair, your nails. The flight can go perfectly. You can check in with no problems, not even get stuck in traffic on the way to the hotel. And you can warm up on the day, have your breakfast. You can do everything you need to get ready for the day and then go into the competition arena and then be hit with nerves that you've never felt before. And then all of a sudden you get on the floor and you forget your routine, right? Who's that happened to before? Me, right? That's happened. Oh, so what's the point? And I said, well, the point, she didn't say what's the point, but I was saying the point of that story is that is the beauty, right? It's that little bit of the unknown. That unknown bit right there that we can't control is the joy and the zest and the brilliance and the pain of competing and performing, right? At anything. Speaking, going to pitch a business deal, asking someone to marry you, asking someone out on a date, going into a show where you're the only one on the stage. You don't know if it's going to work. And half of the reason, I would say the majority of the reason I like to do these shows is to talk about that side of things. The strategic, tactical, technical side. I do a lot of work in the membership area on that. And then here I like to bring up some value because many people don't think about this and they don't talk about it within the context of competing and performing. So I think of life as a life performance. So you and I do not know how much time we have. We don't know how long we get to live. We all plan on a long life. And I think many people get to an old age and they look back with regrets because of the fact that they didn't have this outlook that I might die prematurely with the dance still in me. And I don't want that to happen to you. I don't want that to happen to me. But then we get really caught up on having to know the outcomes of everything, right? Having to know that everything I do is going to work. The result's going to happen. I want everything to be in my control. You and I don't control anything, really. Like, think about it. The amount of stuff that happens around you that you have no control over is actually quite astounding, and it's good that we don't have to think about that. But we like to give ourselves the illusion that we do think about it, right? So that we do control it, and we don't. And so the beauty of performance is that we have this moment where we really understand how vulnerable we are. And I think that's what terrifies people about performance to begin with. But you and I are brave, right? We're brave souls. We're the type of people that will go, you know what? I feel that, but I'm not going to let it beat me. And so this parable I'll bring up in a second is a beautiful way of sort of philosophizing the idea of that even if you go through the suffering of performance, how good does it feel at the end, right? Okay, but you can keep doing that week after week, month after month, year after year, and it can always have this effect of becoming mundane after a while too. You can get used to it because you're not challenging yourself enough, and it can become almost boring in itself because you get used to a certain level of doing things. So I'd always caution you against that. Push yourself into that envelope. Let me be an example for you. It is 1:50 in the morning. I could definitely not be here. In fact, everything in my brain was telling me not to be here. But I also knew deep down that if I gave into that fear, because honestly it was more fear of like, what am I going to say, what I'm going to talk about, I haven't written anything, you'll judge me, what will you think, I won't have cool stories, people are going to, they'll judge my look, they'll judge this, they'll judge that. just go home and rewrite it and do it better later. But that is exactly the thing that I've had the awareness to do my best to overcome. And I encourage you to do the same when you get those moments, particularly when you go into a studio or a competition. You're going to have those moments where you don't want to go. And you have to do it anyway. It's really, really important. Try it, because I'm making that conscious effort throughout the day to do things every day that make me super uncomfortable. Okay. And they strengthen you so long as you have the right attitude, because they can also destroy you if you don't see it as ways to learn and have lessons, right? So sort of point one of all of this is to make sure that you do things that scare you, of course, that take you out of your comfort zone. And sort of the point two is to realize that all those things that happen to you are not necessarily bad. So sometimes they're bad, sometimes they're good, but we don't really know, right? And this is the gripping problem that I have that maybe you can help me with, and we can have a discussion about this, is that you really don't know if the thing that is horrible right now for you is actually the best thing that can happen to you. You also don't know if the best thing that's happening for you is the worst thing to happen to you. And that scares people, right? People don't think like this. Everyone says, look, if it's bad, it's bad. If it's good, it's good. It's like, well, according to who? And then you might take it a level deeper and go, well, okay, maybe not all things are bad, and there's a lesson in it. Okay, but can you go deeper? Of course you can. What if the things that are going right for you are actually the worst things for you? Okay, and that's where this safety area is. It's like, my job is good. My relationship it's okay. My health is okay. I do my lesson. My partner's there. We go to comps, and that all works out. How do you know that's not the worst thing that's happening in your life, right? Because it's only when you're met with that adversity and you're met with an unexpected circumstance that thrusts you into the darkness. You're like, oh my God, I wasn't ready for that. Chaos rules. You're freaking out. You can't sleep. You can't eat as much because the stress is so high. But then maybe that's the best thing that's actually happened to you, right? Because it pulls you out of your comfort, because you realize that in the final analysis, you don't control anything. So maybe you needed that little wake-up call, right? To actually move into action, to take action, do something that matters to you, rather than just going with what's comfortable, right? And don't get me wrong, I like comfort. I like to sleep. I like to have a spa. I like to relax, okay? Rarely, but I do. But I'm also aware in those moments it may not be the thing I need to do, because being uncomfortable, I've sort of gotten a bit I've made a good relationship with it, put it that way. And that's what I encourage you to do. So let me illustrate this in the story of the parable of the farmer. Now, give me 1 second while I'm going to pause this just so my battery doesn't die on my, what do you call it? The computer, right? So I'll play some music. I'll let this just chill for a second, and I'll come back and I'll tell you a cool little story after this little ad break. Yeah, let's just put this on, get some music. I'll be right back. Bring myself back in. Here we go. Okay, so as we were saying, the main thing is to recognize that you don't know necessarily 100% of the time everything that's happening to you is the best thing or the worst thing. And let me demonstrate this story that's famous from Alan Watts back in the 60s, but it's a very old parable, all right? Once upon a time, there was a Chinese farmer who lost a horse. All the neighbors came around that evening and said, "That's too bad." He said, "Maybe." The next day, the horse came back and brought 7 wild horses with it. All the neighbors came around and said, "Why, isn't that great, isn't it?" And he said, "Maybe." The next day, his son was attempting to tame one of these horses and was riding it, was thrown down and broke a leg. All the neighbors came around and said, "That's too bad, isn't it?" And the farmer said, "Maybe." The next day, the conscription officers came around looking for people for the army, and they rejected his son because he had a broken leg. All the neighbors came around in the evening and said, "Isn't that wonderful?" And he said, "Maybe," right? So what's the point of that? The thing that you think is the worst thing that can happen is not even worth judging most of the time, right? You're going to be, and it's not to die. This is the thing that I want to hit home. It's not that your feelings and your emotions aren't relevant in the moment, but it's also recognizing that you don't understand in the final analysis what is happening within your own life, why that event means so much, and the sliding door moment or the pivot or one of those random dots that you're now shooting off. You thought life was going that way, and now boom, fall off the horse, break your leg. Now it's going that way. So yes, you feel bad, feel pain, you are hurting because that moment happened, but the subsequent event was now derailed, right? So you're no longer in the army. And I think it's a wonderful way to approach things, particularly when you may not be doing too well with a competition, or if you're not doing too well performance, or you're not doing too well with your life goals, or if you're not doing too well in a relationship, because those are really personal problems, right? Those are things that hurt. And in my own life, like private life, I've got a lot of things that I'm dealing with that make it very difficult sometimes to actually come and do this sort of work. But I also find this sort of work therapeutic. I find it helpful to just try and figure this stuff out and to talk with you, even if it's one directional, and then get your feedback later on. That's very helpful in trying to understand these type of ideas. And so I want that to be a little bit of a ray of hope, that if you are in a really bad position at the moment, if you're finding yourself struggling, in debt, horrible relationships, bad health, if you're seeing those things, recognize that you are the only problem and the only solution in your life, right? There is a potential and power for you to do something with that, but nobody's going to do it for you. Now, maybe you have a good support system, maybe you have a good family, but they can't do the work for you, right? So please don't wait till rock bottom. Please don't wait till the worst things happen to you before you start to say, maybe I should do this, right? Recognize, though, that all those other events, they're not really good or bad, except your thinking makes it so. And that's a quote from William Shakespeare. And I do like that. I do also struggle with it, because you do have to land on a decision at some point about what you think and sometimes what you feel. You have to make those choices yourself. But if you use that parable to help you, it'll allow you the possibility of reframing a situation to your benefit. So at the end of the day, when you look at all of this, think, okay, how can I reframe whatever this event is so you can grow from it and ultimately win from it? All right. I hope that helps you. It's wonderful to have you here. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being with me late at night. And I look forward to bringing more dance-related cool content in the next days.